Ahoy and welcome back to another video. This weekend I've been dumping pretty much all of my free time into Clair Obscur Expedition 33, a new RPG from Sandfall Interactive, which is now the currently highest rated game of the year on Meta and OpenCritic. I have not finished the game, but I've been loving the first 15 or so hours I put into the game at the time of this recording, so I wanted to get my impressions out, as well as a funny little boss fight at the end that I did this morning that I'm fairly certain I made as miserable as possible for myself. If you just want to skip to that, it starts at the time shown on screen. To start off, I want to say that I'm going to make some comparisons to older games I enjoy when describing some of the mechanics of this game. And I do not mean to water this brilliant game down to rehashing old ideas, but rather highlight that from my point of view, these developers really feel like they have a good grip on what people like, what is good, and how to bring the best parts of great games into their own. Really feels like these devs love games and their inspirations seem clear. One of the highest praises I have for this game is its world design. I can't go more than 5 seconds in this game without seeing some of the most beautiful, out there environments in recent memory. This game does a really good job of blending realistic 3D visuals with an over-the-top fantasy world that is not afraid to be weird and have stuff that doesn't make sense floating around, and they're definitely not afraid to use some color. Each new area feels so vibrant and distinct to the last, and I've been in awe so far. The game is also not afraid to make you feel small. There is a great sense of scale with the big old monsters that are roaming around these areas towering over you, especially some of the bosses that seem impossibly large, but since this is a JRPG, you just run up to them and hit them like any other enemy, which is always funny looking. A bulk of the game time in Clair Obscur is spent in these semi-linear but branching path dungeons, filled with items to scour around to find, enemies to run up and attack, and even some fun little platforming here and there for some secrets. These, let's call them dungeons, all lay within a world map that you'll be exploring between major segments of the game. This really harkens back to the PS1 Final Fantasy maps like Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII, if you're familiar. Your characters get larger in scale, and you run around on a shrunken down version of the map, finding secrets, fighting more monsters, and making your way to the next dungeon. You'll find some roadblocks along the way, like these older games I mentioned, and you'll have to find some new way to navigate and progress onward. I've really been impressed by this world, and I cannot wait to see what beautiful and disturbing things await me. This world would not feel as alive as it does, though, if it were not for the banger of a soundtrack this game has. Basically, every new area has its own overworld theme, battle theme, and boss theme, and everything so far has been really, really good. There's an intense, beautiful, sometimes sad songs, and then when the game is being a little bit lighter, there are some really upbeat, jovial tracks that completely change the vibe and make you nod your head along. The music sets the tone here, and I think I've heard several songs already that might make their way into a YouTube playlist for me to listen to in the future. That all being said though, the thing in this game that has been sinking its claws into me the deepest so far is the battle system. I've always loved turn-based RPGs, but some of my favorites are the ones that have a little bit of spice to them. And this game has spice in spades. I'm going to list some games I love here and what they bring to the table, and then talk about how Clair Obscur takes some of those ideas and runs with them. First off, Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, one of my favorite games ever because of its battle system. As you play the game, you can learn any enemy attack patterns and become invincible because they cannot damage you as you dodge or counter them to hell and back. Clair Obscur is the same. You have a really snappy dodge action to avoid any and all damage as you learn the enemies and their sometimes quick but often telegraphed attacks. Feel even more confident? Try parrying them with a smaller window to get a chance to not just dodge damage but to counter back and do damage of your own. There are also some attacks that require you to jump to avoid, and these dodges have built-in counters of their own, which are all super flashy. Each of these are all mapped to a different button, and it makes everything feel so intentional and makes you feel like a badass when you pull it off. Every character has their own unique twist to them to make them feel unique to the others in the party. They all feel like they could have been the driving gimmick in a whole other game of their own, but it's just for that one character that makes them feel all so much fun to battle with. Whether it be rotating through different stances with Mael, building more powerful spell chains as Lune, or charging up Gustav's metal electrical arm to deal gigantic damage. It's always so satisfying and no one feels less fun to use than the others. I've also really been enjoying the free fire system where you can just use charges to shoot enemy weak points before you take an action. These can be wasteful if you use them too much or if you miss a shot, but if you take close inspection of the enemies you're shooting at, it makes for a nice little twist in turn-based combat. Also, just to note, like the dodging and parrying, all the non-basic attacks in the game also have timing-based inputs as well to deal extra damage and keep you engaged. The last thing I want to talk about with the core gameplay is the Dark Souls portion of it. I did not expect all these little mechanics to be here, but they add so much to the gameplay for someone like me who loves those games. So first of all, the items in battle. This game is not like other traditional RPGs where you go around to shops and buy 50 potions and 10 Phoenix Downs or revives to stock up for fights. Instead, you have a small selection of heals, revives, action point boosts that you have to use and manage between checkpoints. Kinda reminds me of a flask in Dark Souls. You have limited heals, and what do you need to do to refill them, you ask? You get to the bonfire-like flag checkpoints to rest and refill all stock and heal up items, as well as bringing back all enemies to life in the area. At these checkpoints, you can use your attribute points you get from leveling up, allocating them to the stat of choice, very similar to a FromSoft game, and these stats will play with your weapons and their scaling in a similar manner. Weapon variety has also been pretty good so far, whether it's just extra little effects on a weapon or elemental affinities to help take down certain enemies. It feels good to find a new weapon and upgrade it. Outside of weapons and stats, you unlock more abilities to use in battle with a variety of damage types and support effects, and it's all well done and it lets you build the characters how you want them to gel with each one another. There's also the Picto system, which are basically little pieces of equipment of added effects you can have up to 3 of on a character, and once you win a few battles with them on, you can remove that Picto and use another pool of character points to attach those Pictos without them actually being equipped. Hard to explain over a video, but this is a lot of fun to experiment with because you go from having 2 or 3 effects on a character to 6 to 8 to a dozen different little interconnecting effects, making them feel unique and busted in all the right ways like any good RPG will let you do with your characters. Speaking of characters, this last bit here I just want to touch on how much I'm enjoying seeing this small handful of very well acted and believable characters open up to one another and to learn about what their individual motivations are. Every party member I want to know more about, and each of them plays off one another so well and has kept me more than engaged in the story. I care about their outcome in the story, and I want to see them succeed. This story is immensely dark and sad. These characters are marching towards their certain end, trying to end the cycle of a shortened life plaguing their people that they can do nothing about, and desperately want to be the hope that keeps those people back home moving forward. Not to force another game comparison, but it does remind me a lot of what the characters in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 are fighting for. Fighting against the unstoppable clock that's killing them, all for but what reason? So yeah, I gotta say this game's even better so far than I thought it would be, and the reviews have all been spot on so far in my opinion. I can't wait to see what the other 2/3 of the game has in store for me. I'm absolutely loving it. But before we go, like I mentioned at the start, there was an optional boss fight I made myself finish, despite not being high enough level or seemingly missing some sort of mechanic, where I put myself through 40 minutes of grueling, white-knuckle battling. I'm going to run that here now on a speed up so you can get a sense of it. It's pretty funny to look at in hindsight. So as that plays, thanks again for watching, and see you next time.
has it come on?